Is Islam really pure monotheism? Muslims will often say that the Trinity doesn't make any sense and is too complicated to understand, so people should believe in Islam because Islam teaches strict, pure monotheism and what's called Tawheed, which essentially means the oneness or unification of God. They claim Allah is truly one and He is utterly unique and transcendent and nothing in creation is like Him and there are no partners besides Him. And so the narrative is that what Islam teaches is this simple concept that's not confusing at all and is easily understandable by all people, unlike the Trinity. However, when you look into what the Muslim sources actually say, this simple monotheism doesn't seem so simple after all. For example, take the Quran. Ask any Muslim if the Quran is eternal and uncreated. 99.9% of the time, they will say yes. And this is because it is regarded as the speech of Allah, so it must be eternal. But don't take my word for it. Islamic theologian At-Tahawi said in his famous book Al-Qaeda, the Quran is the word of Allah, which originated from Him, without discussing how it was spoken. He sent it down to His messenger by means of revelation. The believers bear witness to its revelation. They are certain that it is the actual words of Allah. It is not created like the words of human beings. Whoever hears it and thinks that it is the words of human beings is a disbeliever. So the Quran is uncreated in the same way Allah is uncreated, so they both share in the divine attributes of being eternal and uncreated. But now we have a problem, because now we have two entities that are eternal, which are Allah and the Quran. Now, no Muslim would say Allah is the Quran, or that the Quran is Allah. So there are two distinct entities, yet both share a similar nature in the sense that they are co-eternal. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. The Hadiths give much more detail on the complex nature of the Quran. For one, it says in Sunan Ibn Majah 3781 that the Quran will come on the day of resurrection like a pale man, and will say, I am the one that kept you awake at night and made you thirsty during the day. So the Quran will take on a visible form and be speaking on the day of judgment, and it also shows the Quran was active in the life of believers, which gives the sense that the Quran must be omnipresent in order to be with any believer at any given time, in order to act upon the believer. So, the Quran seems to have the traits of a personal being as well as the divine attribute of omnipresence. But not only that, it says in Ibn Habban number 124, the Quran is an intercessor and a witness. It is permissible to trust it, and whoever places it as his leader, it will guide him to paradise. And whoever places it behind his back, it will lead him to the fire. So the Quran is intercessing between the believer and Allah by testifying to Allah who is faithful to it and who wasn't. And depending on how faithful you were, will determine your eternal destiny. This would also mean that the Quran is omniscient in a way, in order to know the faithfulness of each believer so that it can properly intercede for them. And this point is even more evident in Sahih Muslim 804a, which starts off by saying to recite the Quran, for on the day of resurrection it will come as an intercessor for those who recite it. So here we see the idea again that the Quran will intercede for you and testify to Allah your recitations and faithfulness to Allah. But not only does the whole Quran do this, but we also see this from individual chapters of the Quran. Sahih Muslim 804a also says, recite the two bright ones, Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran, for on the day of resurrection they will come as two clouds or two shades or two flocks of birds in ranks, pleading for those who recite them. And then in Sunan Abu Dawud 1400, it says, a surah of the Quran containing 30 verses will intercede its reader till he will be forgiven. That is, blessed is he in whose hand is the sovereignty. Surah 67 is where it comes from. So at the very least, Surah 2, 3, and 67 will also be interceding for the believers alongside the Quran itself, and these individual surahs must also be eternal, omnipresent, and omniscient. So within the Quran itself, there is a plurality of entities that possess divine attributes besides Allah. And to give you an illustration on how these individual surahs that intercede for believers on Judgment Day come together to form one single Quran, I found what I thought would be the best representation of how this will look here.
Look, they're coming together.
Dragon Zord in fighting mode.
Check it out! Man, it's more phenomenal!
So to recap where we're at so far within the unconfusing and easy to understand monotheism of Islam, you have Allah, and with Allah is the Quran, which is co-eternal with Allah while being separate from Allah, that also shares the divine attributes of omnipresence and omniscience along with Allah, and has personal qualities like being able to speak and appear as a pale man. And within the Quran, there are a trinity of verses that share the same attributes of the one Quran, which are surahs 2, 3, and 67. So Muslims, if you thought the Trinity was confusing since it teaches that there is one God that consists of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit that share in one divine essence and all share the same attributes, then you are going to be even more confused with the mess that Islam provides. If you ask me, Islam doesn't sound like pure monotheism. It sounds like something an illiterate 7th century caravan robber made up and didn't understand what he was talking about. And one last thing I want to leave you with. Just because something is hard to understand, that doesn't mean it's wrong. For example, quantum physics is extremely complex and hard to understand, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. And the same is true for the Trinity. If there is an almighty, all-powerful God whose greatness is beyond our comprehension, I would expect that God to be complex and not easy to fully understand. Now, if someone came to me with a religion that bragged about how easy it is to understand God, I would definitely be suspicious of that religion and its origins.